This field trip was intended to be a mixture of lay and UFO interests, in a part of Surrey where a number of mysterious things had taken place, and which also included the longest known coincident lay track in Surrey. As well as our own members, we were joined by members of the London Earth Mysteries Circle, the Association of Open University Graduates, and Lionel of the British UFO Research Association. We met at Newlands Corner near Guildford, and I described the object seen from there in 1967 by Squadron Leader Shipwright, and showed the strangely marked stone found on the site when I visited it a few days later. We looked from the beautiful vantage point over the field where the UFO had been seen.
And he saw what he first thought was a white horse galloping in a field. He was actually looking down on it into a field about a mile away, because it's right on top of the hill here. You can see for many miles. And he saw this thing, and then he looked at it and he saw that it wasn't a horse. It was either spherical or very slightly egg-shaped, and it was moving up and down very rapidly in this field. Watched it for a bit, then it stopped and started moving slowly at a right angle to its previous path. It came to a hedge. He thought, well, if this was a balloon which had got loose, then it would get tangled up in this hedge. But in fact, got to this hedge and rose up and over this belt of trees, and he eventually lost interest in it and went off to have their lunch, but he didn't actually see it disappear.
Oh, that's losing very strange. What an ending! What an ending! Must have been an exciting ending.
But anyway, he contacted me about it, and a few days later, my father and him and me went to this field, and we found the place where this thing had been moving backwards and forwards very quickly, north, south, north direction. And we found a scatter of pieces of what appeared to be sandstone. Most of them very small, but one of them was much larger and seemed to have some kind of pattern engraved in the top. Now this I took home with us, and we've actually got here, if you like to come and...
Oh yes, yes. Let's just hold this up, shall we?
You're going to hold them up.
Oh, this would be a really good gracious.
Never found what could make that. Normally, if it had been a farm machinery scratched it, it wouldn't have made the sort of very smooth curve. And we left. There was another piece of the stone, a smaller piece, which was the same as this when we got it. Was left out in the weather, and it discoloured very quickly. So we don't think this could have been there very long. And we don't know what we think. But this was
going this way, it's an error.
This was actually on the place where this was seen, moving very quickly.
That's what my Geiger camera did to see if there's any activity there. Oh.
So that was it. And we'll go. We'll go over there just to see the view from where he saw the UFO.
There's nothing on the other side, is there?
No, there doesn't seem to be. It wasn't embedded in the ground at all.
Oh, it's that tell you don't know, look that. Yeah, that sort of ridge there doesn't look quite natural, does it? That's what they call an erratic. Right. It looks as though something, sharp has been, or steel things have been scraped along, doesn't it? But in the sort of
somebody suggested it looked more like sandblasting than than a scratch. Because a scratch would just make a score mark, but these things are rounded.
But it looks as though it's got a streak line on it. You know, I don't think sandblasting wouldn't leave a streak line, would it? You know, there's, I can see sort of streakiness as though something's been dragged along there. That's fascinating.
Are you suggesting that these bits of stone, the sandstone, was dropped?
Well, I don't know really, because there was no other. There wasn't any other occurrences of it anywhere else in the field.
So it's likely.
Bit of heavy evidence right there, doesn't it?
I'm going to be strong for this, I can tell.
Next we drove to Pitch Hill, south of Shere, a wild and lonely spot on the Hurtwood, where on November the 5th, 1988, a courting couple had seen a brightly lit oval object and experienced a seemingly unearthly quiet that has been reported elsewhere. It was raining hard on this part of the trip, which emphasised the wildness and remoteness of the place. I also described an even stranger sighting near here in 1967, when a strange entity had frightened another courting couple, though there was no UFO seen then, and the assumed connection may not have been the case. The area was also the centre for the activities of the mysterious Surrey Puma.
Karen Cockerell's statement reads as follows. We were sitting in my car when we noticed an object appear into view from the left-hand side. All we were aware of at this time was a white light, but took no great notice of it, believing at first to be an ordinary aircraft. As the object got closer, more directly in view, all we could see was this large, brilliant white light pointing upwards towards the clouds. At this point, my friend got out of the car to receive a clearer view. I remained in the car, but with my window open. As the light got closer, we were aware that the object had no engine noise. It was completely silent. The light stopped directly in front of us, about half a mile away from us. It then turned a complete 360-degree circle exactly where it was and seemed to flip over, revealing red lights on top of an oval-shaped craft. The object then returned at high speed in the direction from which it had come. During the time the object was in view, there seemed to be an unearthly silence, but when it left, the normal sounds of the countryside returned. The Hurtwood track, straight and over 2 miles long, is very prominent to any ley hunter looking at the Dorking Ordnance Survey map. It passes through 2 Scots pine clumps along its length, and extended as a ley, passes through a crossroads at Holmbury St Mary, a farm called Leylands Farm. It skirts the northern ramparts of Holmbury Hill Iron Age Fort. Passes through a triangulation point and another crossroads before reaching the 15th century church at Ley, and then continues to South Nutfield Church, and finally skirts the southern edge of Goodley Stock Fort. The track begins miles from anywhere in Winterfold Forest and runs straight to an equally inaccessible cross tracks not far from Holmbury St Mary. About halfway along its length it's broken by a farm around which walkers must skirt. Thus there are 4 indications that this might be an ancient ley track. Firstly, it's not a modern track from A to B. Secondly, the continuation of the track in the same alignment past the farm suggests it's older than the farm. Thirdly, the nature of the track varies considerably along its length, unlikely if it's of recent origin. And fourthly, it runs straight up some quite steep hills and becomes quite difficult to travel along in these places. On this stretch, between Hound House Road and Lawbrook Lane, it's wide and straight and very well made up.
A little further on, we found the point where, in 1966, Philip Heselton had seen something strange. Shortly after meeting the Hurtwood Ranger, they both saw a strange object, apparently on spindly legs, standing on the ridge. The ranger went on to investigate, but Philip did not, having not much interest in UFOs at the time. We went to the spot from where it had been seen, and Rob Stevenson and I climbed to the ridge along a narrow stretch of the Hurtwood track, going right over the hilltop, crowned with a beautiful and large Scots pine clump. The differences in width and the different stretches were made clear on the part of the track we walked.
Oh yes.
The weather brightened as we drove from here to Holmbury Hill, an Iron Age hill fort nearby, just off the line of the Ley, though it skirts the lower slopes. We had our lunch on this striking and powerful place, and with the wind roaring through the trees, on a seat round a cairn raised in memory of two people who had loved the Hurtwood. We descended from here to the pretty little village of Holmbury St Mary, with its Victorian but none the less attractive church on the side of a hill bearing another large clump. The Ley goes through the clump, but not the church, but nevertheless the north aisle, raised to fit a vestry underneath, felt powerful. Going from here to the well, the line seemed to pass over it to another clump visible in the distance. A dowser present seemed to find the line going a little to one side of the well, but our maps were not of large enough scale to determine which was correct. Whichever was the case, the two clumps were joined by the line, a discovery made on this trip.
So, if you were to stand there and over there, does that make the right line, you see?
Well, that's actually looking along it. The iron's having an effect on it. I'll zoom in on that.
We continued to our next destination, the church at Ley, also on the Hurtwood track Ley. The name sounds significant, and the church, although it doesn't appear so at first sight, is at the junction of several straight tracks. This church is most powerful at the east end. It was 15th century, with an attractive and unusual porch. We walked along one of the tracks, strikingly straight, with a Watkinsian view of the church along it, to the end where, although it's a public footpath, it just seemed to finish at a hedge. Along its line, however, we could see an unusual white scar on the hillside in the distance.
above it, like a tower.
There's something, yes, it looks a bit squarish.